Good day, everyone, again, and welcome to Baltic Economic Outlook. It's our quarterly outlook we do for all three Baltic states, and in this presentation we will provide our key insights on Baltic economies in general and in each country in particular. Presentation itself is relatively short, 4 slides just providing general overview about Baltics, and then 2 slides for each of the countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, so in total only 10 slides, and therefore I strongly encourage you to go to our website nexus.nordea.com and read our latest global economic outlook, in which you will find more detailed information, more detailed forecasts, not only about Baltics but also about Nordic economies and global economies in general. But today we talk about Baltic economies, and the title is, from Baltic tigers to Baltic turtles. So Baltics were considered to be a very fast-growing economies, especially before financial economic crisis 2008-2009, and then economic growth obviously experienced a sharp recession. Post-crisis growth initially was relatively decent, one of the fastest in the European Union, but now it's slowed down. So the key discussion and key aim of today's presentation is to find out why is it happening, and whether this is sustainable, or is it just a temporary drop. And what our latest GDP figures show, indeed, the first message is that GDP growth converged to basically European Eurozone average, and in fact in Q3, in 2016 Q3, GDP growth of all 3 Baltic states fell below Eurozone average. So this is, on one hand, it's a pretty worrying development. On the other hand, it has some positive sides, because at least the Eurozone economy is actually not doing as bad as previously. But still, this is a relatively worrying sign. And also, given that low-hanging fruits have already been picked, and all 3 Baltic economies risk into falling into middle income trap. However, if you look at the right-hand side graph, which shows economic sentiment indicators, they point actually to improved momentum, especially in Lithuania and Estonia, probably to a less extent in Latvia, but still the tendency is that economic sentiment is still relatively high, and it's what's more important is broad-based. Manufacturing actually sector is sentiment in manufacturing sector is improving. Sentiment is improving in service sector, and sentiment is improving in consumer segment. So these 2 slides actually slightly contradictory, and economic sentiment shows that more probably than not, this slowdown in economic growth is just temporary, and it's more specific for 2016, and therefore we forecast slightly faster growth in 2017-2018. You can see our forecast in an upper right corner. So yes, growth is picking up, but obviously it's not. It's still between 2 and 3%. So Baltics as the whole region, and especially the whole European Union, is still, I would say, in this weak growth environment. What are excuses for disappointing growth in 2016? So first is that fixed investment growth stalled, basically dropped quite significantly in Latvia, and also actually in Lithuania it's in negative territory. In Estonia it was in negative territory in 2014, 2015, a slight pickup in 2016, but still you can see that investments are not growing as they used to. but there are some good reasons for that. So the key reason is that we have lower inflows of EU funds, which drag down investment growth, and this temporary negative effect will fade away in 2017. And also another reason is the still the effect being felt from Russian economic crisis. So those sectors that were dependent on Russian market, we see that now, I mean, in this case, it's not a V-shaped recession in Russia. It's more like an L-shaped recession, just as we forecasted. And you can see at the right-hand side of the graph, exports to Russia still continue falling. Actually, they are not even stabilized. They're not rising, and they are still continue falling. And this actually poses some challenge for Baltic economy, since instead of being a bridge between East and West, actually Baltic economies are becoming more and more like periphery of the Western world. It doesn't mean it's something bad, but we need to live with this new reality, and attempts to reorient the exports to other markets, especially to emerging markets, only have a limited success, because it was just coincided that also other emerging markets like South Africa, Brazil, also now recently Middle East are experiencing their own economic challenges, and exports to these countries are naturally not growing as fast as they could. Still, this effect will fade away in 2017, as actually it's in line with our forecast. In 2016, we expected still a slight fall of exports to Russia, and 2017 should see a gradual stabilization and even some pickup. And regarding investments, as I mentioned, it's just a temporary, mostly owing to lower EU funds, and 2017 should see a stronger momentum. What are the challenges? Other external challenges. So, given that eastern side, or I mean Commonwealth independent states in general, and Russia in particular, is actually partly closed for our exports. So the key destination for Baltic exports are European Union, and in particular Eurozone. But here the picture is relatively mixed. On one hand, we see very high political uncertainty, which is actually unprecedented. We haven't seen this uncertainty in 2008-2009 financial crisis, in 2011-12 Eurozone financial crisis, as we see it now. So this obviously dampens sentiment and dampens FDI inflows from these countries to the Baltics, and also export growth to these countries is relatively limited. And still in the pipeline we have elections in France, Netherlands, Germany, recently Italian referendum didn't go as expected. So some challenges with Italian banking system we could predict. So this, on one hand, is not a very nice situation, but on the other hand, on the positive side, we see that European Central Bank, given this political uncertainty, given Brexit, will continue pursuing ultra-loose monetary policy. And we don't expect any interest rate hikes until at least until end of our forecasting horizon, even though we now expect that probably ECB will start tapering already by at the end of next year. But given that our forecast for Fed is 6 hikes until end of 2018, this will be positive for Euro. Since Euro will remain relatively weak, so good for exports, good for competitiveness, and ultra-low interest rates again will encourage encourage investments, and especially in housing, which are actually doing pretty well already in Estonia, recovering in Lithuania, and I would say turning the corner in Latvia. So pretty mixed figure, and still, when we observe Eurozone figures, we see that the cyclical recovery still continues. And another challenge, but also probably an opportunity for Baltics, is deglobalization trends, which are due to many reasons. One is that supply chains are being relocated to closer to home markets, probably more away from China. China is also trying to like have more operations transferred to China itself, etc. So you can see that ever since financial crisis, basically since 2012, world trade in goods are growing slower than world GDP. And with Donald Trump winning elections and threatening to impose tariffs on Mexico and China and moving away from Trans-Pacific trade agreement, transatlantic trade agreement got, actually it's also not moving forward. We have Brexit, we have Russia, which is actually quite isolated, became quite isolated. So this deglobalization trend is continuing, which is obviously not a very good news for open economies just such as Baltics, and especially given that FDIs, the flow of FDIs actually is also not as high as before the crisis. However, opportunity is that Baltics are in fact all three Baltic states are Eurozone members. They have relatively stable public finances. I would say not even stable. I mean, one of the best in the Eurozone. No any systematic imbalances. So given still relatively low wage costs, Baltics are actually now could be considered as I would say even safe haven in this world of emerging markets with significantly lower political, foreign exchange interest rate and other risks. So this also should not be looked only as a negative side. This also provides us with some opportunities. Yeah, so that was actually it about overall Baltic overview. As I mentioned, you can find more detailed figures in our economic outlook. And now I give floor to Tonu Palm, who is from to Tallinn, and he will present what are the key developments in Estonian economy. Please, Tonu.
Hello. I think for Baltics, it's really key that that for longer-term growth, we actually need export growth. We can have some fiscal stimulus in order to get more domestic demand, but I think we already have a decent domestic demand. So by having more fiscal stimulus on for the domestic demand will give you a short-term lift, but not a long-term lift. So that's why I think it's very crucial actually to concentrate on the export sector. The global competitiveness, and we have seen that while the Nordics have done so well relative to other Euro countries, is actually down to global competitiveness. If you move on the next slide, please, we will see here actually the growth of manufacturing, and the manufacturing is really in Estonia driven by exports. 70% of manufacturing goes for exports, and 40% for Nordics. So we really are tied to that part of the world. And what we have seen is that at end of last year we expected turnaround in exports, which happened slightly earlier than we expected in Q2. And after this first lift, we expected to see some confirmation from actually industry side, and that's what we are seeing now. After 4 quarters of decline, we now see first time industrial production picking up softly to in a 3% range, And also on that slide we see manufacturing. So for the last September-October average, industrial production is up year-on-year 5% and manufacturing 3%. What is on the background, of course, is that, as Sigmantas told, that global trade is very muted, but what we are now seeing globally is the confidence index is moving up despite the Brexit. So it's not only China, it's US has considerably recovered compared to last year. End of last year we were in a no growth environment, now we are on the growth side. And actually European manufacturing confidence is actually at the 34-month high. So some signs of some momentum appearing actually, and also if you look on Finnish industrial production, then recent figures have been improving, also sentiment there. So Baltics in a sense are in a waiting mood, and we really, if we don't get the exports boost, then we are facing in a challenging situation. I think Gints will probably concentrate on this, that we get inflation back. And the inflation will lead into real income, which means that will dampen consumption. So on the export side, what we also have seen that first time from August, we got a year-on-year increase in long-awaited export prices. So that's first time since October 2012. So for a long time we haven't seen a turnaround in export prices. We haven't seen turnaround in Chinese PPI, the producer prices. So first time in October we get growth also in China producer prices, and China has been exporting deflation globally. So that will feed into also on the other parts of the world. And if you look on the European side, European PMI indexes point at also some lift in prices. And Trump reflation rates also have considerably lifted metal prices, and with OPEC deal there will be some support for oil prices going forward. And with a stronger commodity prices in a context of relatively weak euro, we are in the future going to see European import prices being lifted. And if the sentiment holds, that will pass on to export prices. So hopefully that trend will build on next year. If you move on the next slide, then a big change has been on the political landscape, and political risk is the highest. We are facing very interesting times in Europe. And also in Estonia we have a new coalition government, and interesting enough, the main aim of the government is fast economic growth. So we are really eager to look forward what are going to be the measures. And for me particularly it's more interesting that what are the not measures to lift short-term growth, which we know that can be done by having more fiscal stimulus of domestic demand, and significant changes will be actually geared up towards consumption. But so far I can't see much emphasis on the longer-term growth. So on the consumption side we will get a lift, and there has been considerable change to non-taxable income, which will affect more than 80% of income earners. Particularly the low wage segment will get the boost of through receiving more real income, and as this wage group will get the lift, and likely that will end up in inflation. What remains uncertainty is actually what will happen with investments. There has been a message that there will be a significant amount of investments to come, but when, in which form, and what will be the structural reforms, that will be a key question mark for 2019. But for sure there is a consumption boost, and most likely a boost to investments. And I hope that there will be more measures like the third one in this fourth bullet, that we actually also do something for export sector, which is we're trying to improve also the investment climate, and there will be a reduction of dividend tax rate from current 20% to 14% for regular income, which means that currently if you invest into Estonia, then during times of investment you are not paying income tax. And if you start to deduct regular income, which is what many European companies do, that they have regular dividend policy in the times of low interest rates, then of course that helps, that it will make it more competitive to have corporate income tax on regular dividends close to where is Ireland. That's all for me. And I really look forward that we really need measures to tackle long-term growth, which is productivity, which is export globalization, competitiveness. And the risk is that, yes, we might get a lift in 2018 growth through stimulating domestic demand before next parliament elections. But what's next?
Okay, thank you, Tony, for your insights on Estonia. I hope everyone can hear me well. My name is Gins Belevich, and I'm economics expert in Latvia. So I will briefly give you the main insights of what's going on in Latvia at the moment and where we're heading in next year. So this year has been rather full of bad surprises. At the beginning of the year, we expected that GDP will grow at around 3%, but it seems like the actual growth rate will be half of that. But next year, we will see that inflation will return, and on the next slide, you see that consumer price inflation is starting to go up a little bit, and judging by recent developments in commodity markets, meaningful inflation will return in 2017 and also will remain in 2018. And after 4 years of very low consumer price growth and times even of deflation, prices will pick up next year. And that's true both for services and for products. Also, high wage increases that we have witnessed during the last few years are starting to contribute to price growth, and especially in service sector, where the inflation rate has been around 2 to 3% over the last few years, and we expect that it will remain at the more or less the same level going forward. And a good sign, nevertheless, is that wage increase is starting to de-accelerate a little bit, and we see some normalizing in the growth rates of wages, and it will be more in line with the productivity growth. Otherwise, keeping up at the pace that we were increasing the wages for the last 2 years, it would mean that we jeopardize our competitiveness, and that might hurt our exports. But currently it seems that we are going back to a pretty normal 3 to 4% wage growth year on year. You can see that in Estonia and Lithuania, they're still growing their wages a little bit faster. That might be a little bit of an advantage to Latvia at the moment, but let's see how it develops, because volatility in the wage increases is quite high. If we move to the next slide, you can see that what has been basically the main reason behind very weak GDP growth, and it's the lack of investments. And we have been talking about this in our Outlook seminars and webinars for the last, I think, couple of years, and saying that if investments don't pick up, we will gradually lose sustainable economic growth, and that's actually what's happening. And this year it's very striking. You see that construction output has gone down by more than 20%, and it's basically because of a chasm in between the EU fund periods, and this year has been very poor in obtaining the EU fund money. So this year investment figures is very weak. On the positive side, you can see that investments in transport equipment are growing, which indicates that we are recovering from the effects of the Russian crisis, meaning the sanctions and the weak ruble that caused the very, let's say, poor export markets in Russia, and also the transit sector was hit. But overall, growth should be much stronger in 2017 than compared to 2016, and we estimate it in Latvia to be around 2.8%. And we have seen some reassuring signs already in Q4 this year that things are starting to improve a little bit. And in transit sector, we see that Latvian Railways reported a better November than last year, which was surprising, given that the whole year has been with double-digit drops in volume. So this is a positive sign. Also, we see that government spending for infrastructure is starting to increase in Q4. And unless some downside risks materialize next year, the growth for 2017 should be solid. This is it from me. Now I give floor back to Žygimantas, who will give a little bit more detail on the Lithuanian situation.
Thank you, Gins. Now I will just share my thoughts about Lithuania, and the title of this short presentation is Unwelfare State. You have welfare states in Scandinavia and Western Europe, but you may have an unwelfare state as well, and let's see what the challenges it poses to our economic development. By the way, this picture is illustrating well. It's taken in the very center of Vilnius, so you can see some very old and crappy buildings in front of some shiny brand new skyscrapers. So on a positive side, there is no doubt that Lithuania achieved great success during the post-crisis period, especially looking at aggregate GDP figures and at aggregate public finance figures. So Lithuania has managed to reduce deficit in just 6 years from more than 9% of GDP to a mere 0.2% of GDP in 2015 and 2016. This year is going to be a slightly higher deficit, but still it will be below 1%, among the lowest deficit levels in the whole European Union. So this is clearly a positive sign and a big achievement, I would say, almost unprecedented in global history, except for our neighbors Latvians, which also achieved similar success. And the trust, not only we achieved, we balanced our public finances, but we actually gained the trust. Actually, borrowing costs at the moment are extremely low. Actually comparable even to France and Belgium, which have slightly higher credit rating, and Lithuania even borrowed for 2-year period at negative rates several months ago. So this was again unprecedented thing that investors were actually willing to lend money for negative rates to a small Baltic country as Lithuania. And even in Central Eastern Europe, if you look at our credit rating and our borrowing costs, they are among the lowest actually. And on the right hand side you can see GDP per capita development, and you can see that from 2009 to 2016 the convergence with the European Union was quite impressive. Actually, we are now stand at more than 75% of GDP. So this convergence was again one of the fastest in the EU, and already okay, maybe it's not very good, very kind of positive looking from Western European perspective, but we actually converged to the levels seen in Portugal and and Greece. So this picture really looks very nice and promising. However, we still have some internal challenges which may pose challenges in longer term, and the biggest challenge is that overall Lithuania fails to create a modern welfare state, even though government after government actually claims or at least aims to create one, with no exception the recently elected government in November. So if you look, say, at income inequality, you can see that during the post-crisis period, in fact, inequality even increased even more. And if you look at the ratio, if you take the ratio between top quantile and lowest quantile, lowest income quantile, you see that Lithuania has the second highest income inequality in the European Union, just behind Romania. And this is significantly higher, say, to other Central Eastern European countries, like Slovakia, Slovenia, or Czech Republic. And this actually is a pretty worrying sign, because these vast regional differences preclude many citizens from benefiting from this economic recovery, which was experienced during the post-crisis period. And as a result, Lithuania still suffers from pretty high net emigration. In fact, the net emigration rate was the highest in the European Union over the last, during the post-crisis period. And these challenges, high income inequality and emigration, may pose real challenges for our long-term growth sustainability. So newly elected government is aiming again and again try to create a modern welfare state which would not have so high income inequality, aims to stem and emigration, but it remains to be seen how it will be successful. So far, from the government program just presented 2 days ago, we actually have some reserved optimism that we are moving to some extent in the right direction, but obviously it will take time, at least 2, 3, maybe probably 4, and maybe 5 years for these actions to really impact on these indicators, and so that to stem immigration and reduce high income inequality in Lithuania. So this is actually will also highly influence our long-term economic growth prospects, because as labor market becomes tight, as wages are growing, and Lithuania needs to look for other competitiveness other than cheap labor. So these actually indicators will become ever more important. So yeah, so that's basically it from my side personally. So you see our contact details in the slide, and please do not hesitate to ask any questions if you want. Then thank you for joining our webinar. Have a nice day. Please read our new economic outlook, and don't hesitate to contact us in case you have any questions. So have a nice day.